The night had fallen with an unsettling stillness, the kind that seemed to press down on the small suburban neighborhood like an invisible weight. Streetlights flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shadows over the neatly trimmed lawns and silent houses. It was a night that should have been ordinary. Quiet children tucked away in bed, the faint hum of televisions leaking from behind closed curtains, and the occasional bark of a distant dog breaking the silence. But that night, the normalcy was shattered. On Maple Street, in the house that everyone once thought so ordinary it could be overlooked, something had vanished without a trace. Not a thing, not an object, but a person, your neighbor, Mr. Leonard Grayson. Leonard wasn't the kind of man who invited attention. Quiet, reserved, with a polite smile that rarely reached his eyes. He lived alone since his wife had passed 5 years ago. To the neighborhood, he was just another fixture, someone you exchanged polite nods with but never really knew. Until the day he disappeared. It began with subtle oddities. Newspapers piled up on his doorstep, uncollected for days. His mailbox overflowed with unopened letters. The lawn, usually meticulously maintained, began to grow wild, tendrils of grass creeping over the cracked concrete walkway. Neighbors exchanged concerned glances, but none dared to intervene. Leonard was private, maybe even reclusive. When the first week passed without a single sign of him, a quiet unease settled over the street. Was he sick? Had something happened inside that quiet house? The police were called, hesitant at first, unsure if this was a case of a simple absence or something far darker. Inside the house, the scene was unsettling. Furniture lay untouched, dinner plates still on the table, a cold cup of coffee forgotten on the kitchen counter. The television was paused on a static-filled channel, a faint hum lingering in the air. It was as if Leonard had simply stepped out for a moment, and then vanished into thin air. There were no signs of forced entry, no indications of struggle or theft. The door was locked from the inside, windows intact. The only clue, a single, crumpled note found on the kitchen floor, written in Leonard's careful handwriting. I see them watching. I hear their whispers beneath the floorboards. They're closer than ever. I cannot stay. The neighborhood was gripped by fear and confusion. Whispers began to swirl. Stories of strange noises heard late at night, shadows moving just beyond sight, and the eerie feeling of being watched. Some spoke of a curse tied to the land, old legends of disappearances dating back decades. You, drawn by curiosity and a need to understand, began piecing together the fragments of Leonard's life. His past was a tapestry woven with threads of mystery. Old friends who vanished, unexplained absences, and a growing obsession with the occult in his final days. The deeper you dug, the clearer it became. Leonard had been fighting something invisible, something ancient and relentless that had finally claimed him. As you walk through the empty rooms of his home, the silence is thick with secrets. The walls seem to breathe. The floorboards creak beneath your feet as if whispering warnings. The air grows colder, heavier, charged with the lingering presence of a battle unseen. And in the stillness, you realize Leonard didn't just vanish. He was taken by shadows that lurk just beyond the edge of sight, by a force that feeds on fear and thrives in silence. You hear a faint scratching beneath the floorboards, soft but insistent, a sound that freezes your blood. This is no ordinary disappearance. This is a story that refuses to fade. A haunting echo of a neighbor who vanished without a trace. And a warning that sometimes the most terrifying things are the ones we cannot see. The house seemed to hold its breath as you stepped deeper inside, every creak of the wooden floor magnified in the oppressive silence. Dust motes floated lazily in the pale moonlight spilling through drawn curtains, and the stale scent of neglect lingered in the air like a forgotten memory clawing to be remembered. It was a space frozen in time, unchanged, untouched, as if Leonard had simply slipped out moments ago, yet all signs pointed to a disappearance far more sinister. On the living room wall, a faded photograph caught your eye. Leonard stood beside a woman whose face was worn with grief, her eyes haunted as if they carried the weight of untold sorrow. You traced the edges of the frame, fingers trembling. That woman, his wife, had left a hollow space in this home that now seemed to pulse with a darker presence. Had her passing opened a door Leonard never meant to cross? You moved toward the kitchen, where the note was found, and the air grew colder still. The note's words echoed in your mind. I see them watching. I hear their whispers beneath the floorboards. What whispers could be so terrible to drive a man to vanish? Your eyes scanned the floor, and there it was, a faint outline around one particular floorboard, slightly raised, almost imperceptible, as though hiding something beneath. Your hand hovered uncertainly above it. Then, heart pounding, you pried it loose. Beneath the board lay a small cavity, inside which rested a weathered journal, its leather cover cracked and worn. You pulled it free, the dust swirling into the cold air, carrying with it a chill that sank deep into your bones. Opening the journal, you found Leonard's handwriting, neat but frantic, filling the pages with desperate notes and cryptic warnings. They are here. I don't know how much longer I have. The whispers beneath the floorboards have grown louder, and I can no longer ignore the eyes that follow me everywhere. This place is cursed by something that thrives in the darkness, feeding off our fear, our silence. The disappearances, they aren't accidents. They're sacrifices. You read on, page after page, unraveling a story of obsession and terror. Leonard had become consumed by the legend of the Vanishing, a shadowy force that haunted the neighborhood for generations, claiming neighbors one by one, dragging them beneath the earth to be forgotten forever. His journal detailed his attempts to fight back. Rituals, protective charms, even attempts to communicate with whatever dwelled beneath the floorboards. Last night, I heard the scratching again, louder, more urgent. I tried to block it out, but it follows me even in my dreams. If anyone finds this, beware. The curse is real, and it will not let go. The final entry was smudged, the ink running as if from trembling hands or tears. A sudden creak from upstairs jolted you out of your thoughts. The house seemed alive now, shifting and breathing with a presence that was watching you. You hesitated, then climbed the narrow staircase, each step creaking beneath your weight. The upper floor was darker, colder, the air thick with a suffocating stillness. At the end of the hall, Leonard's bedroom door stood ajar, darkness spilling into the corridor like a shadow come to life. Inside, the room was a shrine to fear. Walls were covered in hastily scrawled symbols, protective circles, and warnings written in fading ink. Candles, long burned out, stood like silent sentinels on the windowsill. In the center of the floor, an array of objects lay arranged meticulously. Old photographs, fragments of hair, a broken pocket watch frozen at midnight. You reached out to touch one of the photos, your fingers trembling. It was a picture of the neighborhood, but with several faces scratched out. Neighbors who had disappeared over the years, their names whispered only in fear. And then, a sudden chill swept through the room, a low rumble vibrating beneath your feet, growing steadily until it felt as if the very earth was shifting beneath you. You stumbled backward as the floor beneath the bed creaked ominously. The whispering started, soft at first, then rising like a chorus of voices swirling in the darkness, impossibly close. You should not be here. The words seemed to seep from the walls themselves, chilling and pleading, warning and accusing all at once. You spun toward the door, but it slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows, trapping you inside. Panic surged, but amidst the chaos, a strange calm settled over you. A voice within that whispered, "To escape, you must understand." You forced yourself to focus, piecing together the clues Leonard left behind. The curse wasn't random. It was a cycle, a pattern tied to the land, to the house, and to the secrets buried beneath. With trembling hands, you traced the protective symbols on the walls, recalling the journal's instructions. To break the cycle, you must face the darkness, bring light to the shadows, and speak the names of the lost. You took a deep breath, feeling the weight of generations pressing down on you, and began to chant the names scratched out from the photographs. The forgotten neighbors, the vanished souls. The whispering intensified, a crescendo of voices rising in fury and sorrow. Then, Suddenly, a profound silence. The door creaked open slowly. You stepped into the hallway, heart hammering, and as you looked back, the symbols on the walls glowed faintly before fading into nothingness. The house exhaled, releasing a breath it had held for decades. Outside, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the world in hues of gold and possibility. The vanished neighbor's story was no longer one of disappearance and fear. It was a warning, a testament to the unseen battles that shape our world. And as you walked away from the house on Maple Street, you understood something deeper. Sometimes, the greatest disappearances are not physical, but the vanishing of truth, memory, and courage. And only by facing the shadows can we hope to bring them back into the light. The neighborhood would never be the same again. The morning sun filtered weakly through the half-drawn curtains as you stepped outside Leonard's house, the air still heavy with the residue of the night's horrors. The neighborhood, bathed in the soft glow of dawn, appeared almost serene. Children playing in yards, neighbors chatting casually over fences. But beneath that facade, something fundamental had shifted. The invisible veil that once masked the dark secrets was now torn. You felt the weight of the experience settling deep within your bones. The whispers beneath the floorboards, the haunted symbols, the chilling voices, it was all real. The curse was real, and it was still there, waiting. Word spread quickly. The disappearance of Leonard Grayson, once a hushed rumor, became a story everyone told. Some whispered of the curse, others dismissed it as superstition. But the house remained empty, a monument to fear, its windows like dark, unblinking eyes watching the street. Curiosity pulled you back time and again, a gnawing compulsion that no one else seemed to share. You weren't sure if it was bravery or madness driving you, but the more you learned, the clearer the truth became. Leonard was not the first. He was part of a long lineage of victims, sacrificed to a darkness rooted beneath the very foundations of this town. Research uncovered old newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and interviews with elderly residents who remembered stories their grandparents told. Stories of neighbors who simply vanished overnight, houses abandoned with no explanation, and a silence that swallowed whole families. One particular tale stood out. A family from nearly a century ago, whose children were rumored to have been taken by the shadows beneath the earth. The story spoke of a hidden chamber beneath their home, sealed off after a series of tragedies, and the eerie sounds neighbors claimed to hear. A lullaby sung by unseen lips, a child's cry that echoed through empty streets. Driven by a newfound purpose, you began to investigate the history of the land itself. The town was built over what was once a dense forest, ancient and untamed, where rituals had been performed long before settlers arrived. The ground was said to be cursed, a place where the boundary between this world and the next was thin and fragile. Digging deeper, you uncovered a journal belonging to a man named Elias Harrow, a figure shrouded in myth, said to have been a guardian who once tried to contain the darkness beneath the town. His writings spoke of sacrifices, bindings, and a terrible price paid to keep the shadows at bay. "The earth thirsts for souls," he wrote, "and when the bloodline of the cursed grows thin, it reaches out, grasping for the living. To break free is to awaken the horror beneath." Armed with this knowledge, you knew your path was perilous but necessary. You returned to Leonard's house, this time prepared to face whatever waited beneath the floorboards. The air was colder, heavier, and as you pried open the hidden hatch once more, a foul breath of stale earth and decay rose up to greet you. Descending into the darkness, your flashlight revealed a narrow tunnel winding deep into the earth, walls slick with moisture, and the faint, unmistakable sound of something moving just beyond the beam's reach. As you ventured further, the whispers returned, more insistent, weaving through the air like a twisted lullaby. Shadows danced at the edge of your vision, taunting, beckoning. You reached a cavernous chamber, its walls etched with symbols older than time, pulsing faintly with a sickly glow. In the center lay remnants of offerings, withered flowers, broken trinkets, and bones half buried in dust. Suddenly, a cold hand brushed your shoulder. You spun around, but no one was there. The whispers grew louder, overlapping voices pleading, accusing, warning, leave, or join us forever. Steeling yourself, you spoke aloud the names you had learned, those of the lost neighbors, the forgotten souls trapped in this subterranean prison. The ground trembled, dust falling like rain, and for a moment, the chamber was filled with a blinding light. When your eyes adjusted, the oppressive presence had lifted, replaced by a quiet peace. You climbed out as dawn broke once more, the weight of the curse seemingly lifted, but forever etched into your soul. The vanishing neighbor was no longer a mystery, but a call to remember, to confront the darkness that lurks beneath, and to protect the light above. And as you walked away from the cursed house, the neighborhood began to breathe again, free, if only for now. But you knew deep down the shadows were patient. They always return. The days that followed were a strange mix of clarity and unease. The heavy burden of knowledge weighed on your shoulders, yet a fierce determination blossomed inside you, a drive to ensure the horrors Leonard endured wouldn't claim another soul. But the neighborhood didn't seem eager to embrace the truth. The locals, gripped by a collective denial, whispered behind closed doors or changed the subject swiftly whenever the vanished neighbor was mentioned. Fear, after all, is a powerful silencer. You found yourself drawn back to the house repeatedly, compelled to explore the layers of its dark past. Each visit uncovered fragments of stories left untold, scraps of lives swallowed by silence. You spoke with aging residents, piecing together memories that stretched back decades. Tales of strange noises, unexplainable disappearances, and a creeping dread that never quite dissipated. These stories, fragmented and sometimes contradictory, formed a mosaic of terror that both fascinated and haunted you. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the streetlights flickered to life, you encountered Mrs. Caldwell, a frail woman whose eyes held the weight of many winters. Her house sat a few doors down from Leonard's, and she was one of the few willing to speak openly about the curse. "They say it's the earth itself," she whispered, voice trembling but resolute. "Hungry, it feeds on fear, sorrow, the forgotten. Leonard wasn't the first, and he won't be the last if we don't remember. We must speak their names, keep their stories alive. Otherwise, they vanish, without a trace, without a voice." Her words echoed the warnings in Leonard's journal and Elias Harrow's ancient writings. The curse wasn't just about disappearance. It was about erasure, obliterating memories, wiping clean the pages of history so no one would dare uncover the truth. Driven by this revelation, you organized a gathering of neighbors, an unlikely assembly of skeptics and believers. In the dim light of the community hall, you shared the stories you'd collected, the chilling accounts of those who vanished, and the ominous legacy buried beneath the town's foundations. Some scoffed, others listened in silence, but a handful stayed, eyes wide with recognition, hearts pounding with the urgent need to fight back. Together, you devised a ritual, an act of remembrance and defiance to break the cycle of silence and fear. On the night of the ritual, the neighborhood gathered around Leonard's house. Candles flickered in the darkness, their flames trembling in the cold wind. You led the ceremony, speaking the names of the lost with unwavering conviction, lighting each candle as a beacon against the darkness. The air thickened with anticipation, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. A low hum vibrated through the earth, growing until it crescendoed into a chorus of whispers, some mournful, some angry, but all undeniable proof that the forgotten were listening. Then, as the last name was spoken, a sudden stillness fell. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a fragile peace that settled over the neighborhood like a protective shroud. The vanished neighbors, it seemed, were finally acknowledged. But even as relief washed over you, a chilling truth remained. The curse was not broken. It was only kept at bay by the collective memory and courage of those who refused to forget. And as the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, you knew the shadows beneath the floorboards would always be waiting, patient, watchful, and hungry for the next silence. The vanished neighbor's story was no longer one of fear and mystery, but a solemn warning. A call to remember, to speak, and never to let the darkness claim us again. And somewhere deep beneath the earth, The whispers faded but never disappeared. The weeks following the ritual passed with an uneasy calm. The neighborhood seemed quieter, the dread that had hung thick in the air slowly lifting. But peace, you knew, was often the prelude to something darker. The vanished neighbor's story was not yet finished. It was a thread woven into a tapestry of secrets, and pulling on it had begun to unravel more than anyone anticipated. Late one night, as a cold wind rattled the windows of your home, a sudden, sharp knock at the door jolted you from restless sleep. Standing there was a young woman, her eyes wide and haunted, clutching a faded photograph. She introduced herself as Claire, a distant relative of one of the vanished neighbors, her great-uncle Thomas Grayson. She had come with a warning and a desperate plea for help. Her story was chilling. Thomas, like Leonard, had disappeared without a trace decades ago. But Claire had uncovered something terrifying hidden among her family's possessions. A diary filled with cryptic entries detailing encounters with shadowy figures beneath the house, warnings scrawled in shaky handwriting, and a growing madness that consumed Thomas before he vanished. The diary spoke of a presence beneath the floorboards, an ancient entity that demanded sacrifices and whispered promises of power in exchange for silence. As Claire spoke, a creeping sense of dread settled over you. The curse was not just a local legend or a series of unfortunate events. It was alive, evolving, and now reaching beyond the boundaries of the neighborhood. Determined to uncover the full truth, you and Claire returned to the Grayson house together. Armed with the diary, flashlights, and an unshakable resolve, you descended once more into the depths beneath the floorboards. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and the oppressive silence pressed against your eardrums. Following the diary's clues, you navigated twisting tunnels and ancient chambers adorned with symbols pulsing faintly in the dark. The presence that had haunted Leonard and Thomas felt closer now, its hunger palpable. Whispers echoed, urging you to flee, to forget, to become part of the silence. But you pressed on, uncovering a hidden alcove where a crude altar stood, stained with time and something far darker. The diary revealed this was the heart of the curse, a place where offerings had been made to appease the entity, binding it to the earth and feeding its insatiable thirst. Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the chamber, and the shadows coalesced into a form, vague but unmistakably watching. You could feel its eyes, cold and merciless, probing your soul. You cannot break what was forged in blood. It hissed, voice like the rustling of dead leaves. Summoning every ounce of courage, you spoke aloud the names of the lost, Thomas, Leonard, and the others, declaring their memory unbreakable and their stories alive. The shadows writhed, the chamber trembling as if the very earth was protesting. But then, a sharp crack echoed through the tunnel, and the ground beneath you shuddered violently. Dust rained down, and the passage began to collapse. You and Claire scrambled back, hearts pounding as the darkness pursued you. Emerging into the cool night air, you gasped for breath, the weight of the entity's threat heavy but somehow diminished. The curse was ancient and relentless, but it was not invincible. Claire clutched the diary tightly. "We have to keep fighting," she said, eyes burning with determination. "If we forget, it wins." As you watched the Grayson house disappear behind the veil of night, the truth was clear. The vanished neighbor's fate was a warning, a battle cry. The shadows beneath the floorboards would always be there, waiting to claim those who dared to silence their story. And so, the fight to remember began anew, because some secrets, buried alive, refused to stay hidden forever. The days following your narrow escape from the collapsing tunnels beneath the Grayson house were drenched in a restless haze. Sleep evaded you like a fleeting ghost, and every creak in your home made your heart race, as if the shadows had followed you back from those ancient, cursed depths. The diary Claire carried was a constant companion, its pages worn and fragile, yet pulsing with an energy that felt almost alive, like a living testament to the horrors buried beneath the surface. You found yourself wandering the streets late at night, the neighborhood's quiet streets stretched out under a moon that cast long, unnatural shadows. The houses, once familiar and mundane, now loomed like silent sentinels guarding secrets far too dark for daylight. Every face you passed held a flicker of the same unspoken fear, the collective knowledge that the vanished were not gone by chance, but because of something ancient, something malevolent. Claire's insistence that the curse fed on silence had become a mantra you repeated under your breath, as if by uttering it you could stave off the creeping oblivion. She spoke of the curse as if it were a living, breathing entity, a parasitic force that fed on forgotten memories and the quiet acceptance of loss. "It's like a cancer," she said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "It spreads through the cracks of silence, growing stronger every time we turn away." Determined to fight back, you began to gather the stories of those who had vanished, speaking with families who had long given up hope, piecing together shattered fragments of lives erased from the record. The more you learned, the clearer it became that the curse was woven into the very fabric of the town's history, an unbroken chain of sorrow and disappearance stretching back centuries. One name kept surfacing: Eleanor Grayson, Thomas's wife, who had vanished shortly after her husband's disappearance. Rumors whispered that she had tried to break the curse herself, delving into forbidden knowledge and dark rituals, only to be swallowed by the shadows she sought to command. Some said she had become one with the entity beneath the floorboards, a spectral guardian trapped between worlds. Your research led you to the Old Town Library, a dusty archive of forgotten lore and fragile manuscripts. There, hidden among the brittle pages of a tattered grimoire, you found a passage that sent a chill down your spine. The curse is bound not by blood alone, but by remembrance. To forget is to invite the abyss. To remember is to hold the light. It was a simple truth, yet profound in its implications. The curse thrived on erasure, on the absence of memory. Every forgotten victim was a feast for the darkness, a whisper lost in the void. To fight it, you had to become a keeper of stories, a guardian of truth. You shared this revelation with Claire, and together you devised a plan, a way to turn the curse's own power against it. If the entity fed on silence, then your weapons would be voices, memories spoken aloud, and stories shared in the light of day. You began organizing gatherings, public forums where the community could come together and share the tales of the vanished. The air was thick with emotion, grief, anger, defiance, all mingling in a potent cocktail that breathed life into the forgotten. Slowly, walls that had been built on fear and denial began to crumble. But the curse did not rest. With every gathering, every story told, the shadows beneath the floorboards grew restless. Strange occurrences plagued the town. Pets disappearing, objects moving on their own, fleeting glimpses of shadowy figures at the edge of vision. The entity was warning you, testing the limits of your resolve. One night, as you returned home from a particularly powerful meeting, you found a small doll lying on your doorstep, a fragile, cracked porcelain figure eerily familiar. It was a replica of the dolls Leonard had described in his journal, the ones he believed were vessels for the curse's power. A cold shiver ran down your spine as you picked it up, the weight of the curse suddenly very real and very close. Claire's face appeared in your mind, her voice steady but urgent. "We have to keep fighting. The curse will try to silence us, but we are louder. We are the light in the darkness." You clutched the doll tightly, feeling the resolve harden within you. The vanished were not just memories. They were warnings, they were beacons, and they were counting on you. The battle beneath the floorboards had only just begun. That night, sleep was a distant memory as you pored over the diary once more, tracing the lines between past and present. The entity's whispers seemed to seep through the walls, a constant murmur just beyond comprehension, urging surrender, promising oblivion. But you resisted, chanting the names of the lost, holding fast to their stories as if your life depended on it, because, in many ways, it did. The vanished neighbor was no longer a haunting mystery. It was a living nightmare, a curse that would not let go, demanding to be remembered. And as dawn broke, casting light over the neighborhood, You understood this was more than a fight for survival. It was a fight for the soul of the forgotten, and you were their last hope. The shadows beneath the floorboards may always hunger, but so long as voices rise in defiance, they will never claim victory. The morning light spilled hesitantly through your window, struggling to push back the lingering darkness that seemed to cling stubbornly to the edges of your consciousness. Despite the dawn's promise of clarity, your mind remained tangled in the thick web of the curse, a sinister tapestry woven through decades, if not centuries, of silence and disappearances. The vanished neighbor's story was no longer just a haunting memory. It had become your obsession, a gnawing presence that demanded answers beyond the fragile pages of the diary Claire had brought into your life. You sat at your desk, the diary open before you, its delicate pages fluttering slightly in the cool morning breeze sneaking through the cracked window. The faded ink and shaky handwriting chronicled not just events, but the unraveling sanity of those who dared to confront the darkness beneath their feet. Thomas Grayson's final entries spoke of voices rising from the earth, whispers promising salvation but delivering only madness. Eleanor's desperate notes hinted at forbidden rituals, ancient pacts, and a curse so deeply rooted it had become a part of the land itself. Determined to push deeper, you began cross-referencing the diary's cryptic references with historical records and local legends. You discovered that the neighborhood had once been the site of a small settlement, long abandoned and forgotten after a series of tragic events. Unexplained illnesses, sudden disappearances, and a wave of mass hysteria that culminated in the destruction of the original settlement's town hall. The ground beneath your feet was layered with history, bloodied, broken, and soaked in silence. Late in the afternoon, Claire arrived with a heavy burden in her eyes. She held a worn envelope, sealed with an unmarked wax stamp, and inside it were letters, handwritten, fragile, and yellowed with age. They belonged to Eleanor Grayson, hidden away for decades, never delivered, never read until now. Reading Eleanor's words felt like stepping into a shadowed mirror. Her voice echoed with fear and determination, revealing secrets that had been buried with her. She spoke of the entity beneath the floorboards not as a myth, but as a living force that demanded tribute, a darkness that fed on the souls of the forgotten. But her words also held hope, a hint of a ritual, a possibility of severing the curse's grip. If only the community could come together to remember, to resist, to fight back. That night, you and Claire gathered the neighborhood once again, this time with Eleanor's letters as your guide. The room was thick with tension and unspoken fears, but as the letters were read aloud, a strange energy began to fill the air, a mixture of sorrow, defiance, and the fragile spark of hope. You could feel the weight of countless eyes on you, the unspoken question hanging heavy. Could the curse truly be broken? Or was this gathering merely another chapter in the endless story of loss? As voices rose in unison, recounting stories, sharing memories, you noticed the shadows in the corners of the room shifting, flickering like candlelight caught in a sudden breeze. The entity was listening. It was enraged. Days turned into nights filled with restless dreams. Visions of dark figures moving beneath floorboards, of lost neighbors reaching out from the void, their faces twisted in silent pleas. You awoke repeatedly to the faintest sounds, a soft scraping, a whispering wind that carried faint echoes of laughter and tears. One evening, as the moon hung low and full, Claire and you returned to the Grayson house for a final confrontation. The earth beneath the floorboards felt alive, pulsing with malevolent intent. You carried Eleanor's letters, the diary, and an unshakable resolve. Descending into the darkness, you felt the temperature drop, the air thickening with a tangible dread. The familiar symbols etched into the walls seemed to glow faintly, a warning and a challenge. The altar, stained and ancient, awaited. You began the ritual described in Eleanor's letters, voices trembling but strong as you called upon the names of those lost, invoking memories, breaking the silence that had fed the darkness for generations. The shadows writhed, the chamber shaking violently as if the earth itself was protesting. But this time, instead of retreating, you pushed forward, chanting louder, your voice a beacon in the suffocating blackness. Suddenly, a blinding light erupted from the altar, forcing the shadows to recoil with a guttural scream that echoed through the tunnels. The oppressive weight lifted, replaced by a profound stillness. As you emerged into the cool night air, the curse's grip felt loosened, though not entirely broken. The vanished neighbors were no longer lost to silence. They were remembered, their stories alive in the hearts of those who refused to forget. And though the shadows beneath the floorboards may still linger, waiting and watching, you had taken the first step toward reclaiming what was stolen, a future where the curse could no longer feed in the dark. The fight was far from over, but the light had been kindled. The secrets buried alive would no longer remain forgotten. The dawn after the ritual broke slowly, its golden fingers spilling cautiously across the town. It was a fragile morning, as if the world itself hesitated, unsure whether the shadows beneath the floorboards had truly retreated or merely withdrawn to regroup. The silence in the streets was thick, not peaceful but expectant, charged with a strange energy that prickled at the skin. You awoke in your small apartment, the diary still open on your desk, Eleanor's letters carefully laid beside it. For a moment, the sun's light bathed the room in warmth, yet a chill settled deep in your bones. The ritual had disrupted something ancient, yes, but old forces rarely sleep peacefully after such disturbances. Claire was already awake when you called her, her voice calm but edged with the same tension you felt. "We've bought ourselves time," she said, "but there's more beneath this than we realized." The days that followed became a relentless search for the truth hidden beneath the layers of history and myth. You and Claire pored over records at the local archives, visited elderly residents whose memories span the decades, and explored the edges of forgotten neighborhoods where no one dared tread after dark. Each story you uncovered was a thread in the tapestry of the curse. Families torn apart, neighbors disappearing without a trace, whispered warnings scrawled in margins of diaries and letters. The curse wasn't just a tale for the frightened. It was a wound that had festered beneath the surface, bleeding into the lives of everyone who lived there. You discovered that the entity beneath the floorboards was not merely a spirit or a haunting. It was a manifestation of the town's collective guilt and fear. It grew stronger with every secret kept, every truth buried, feeding off the silence of those too afraid to speak. In one particularly harrowing session, an elderly woman named Mrs. Aldridge, who had lived through the darkest years of the original settlement, recounted a story that chilled you to the core. She spoke of a gathering during a harsh winter, when the townsfolk, desperate and terrified, had made a pact, not with an otherworldly force, but with each other. They had agreed to forget the disappearances, to bury their grief and guilt beneath layers of denial and silence, hoping the darkness would retreat if ignored. But the darkness had only grown. Mrs. Aldridge's eyes, clouded with age, locked onto yours with an intensity that made you swallow hard. "The curse isn't just out there," she said quietly. "It's inside us, until we face it, not just in the shadows beneath our feet, but in the truths we refuse to speak. It will never let go." That night, back in your apartment, you stared out the window at the houses lining the street, each one a silent testament to lives lived under the weight of unspoken horrors. You realized that the ritual beneath the floorboards was only the beginning. To truly break the curse, the town itself had to confront its past, its collective denial and the secrets buried deep within its foundations. You shared this revelation with Claire, who nodded solemnly. "We need to bring everyone into the light," she said. "Not just the victims, but the whole community. The curse feeds on isolation as much as silence." Together, you began organizing town meetings, inviting residents to share their stories, their fears, their memories. The gatherings were raw and emotional. Walls built over decades of fear crumbled under the weight of shared grief. People wept openly, confessed long-held secrets, and found unexpected solace in each other's honesty. But as the light of truth grew stronger, so did the darkness's fury. Strange phenomena intensified. Power outages, objects moving on their own, unexplained cold spots in homes where warmth once lingered. The entity beneath the floorboards seemed to lash out, desperate to maintain its grip on the town's soul. One evening, As you and Claire returned from a particularly intense meeting, you found your front door ajar, the familiar porcelain doll from before resting ominously on your doorstep. The crack in its face seemed to deepen, as if the curse itself was fracturing your resolve. You picked it up, feeling a wave of cold wash over you. Claire's voice echoed in your mind, steady but unwavering. "We can't stop now. The curse is scared because we're fighting back." Determined, you doubled your efforts, turning the diary, the letters, and your own investigations into a growing archive of resistance. You began recording testimonies, preserving memories, and broadcasting the stories to neighboring towns. The curse's hold weakened as its victims were no longer forgotten but remembered, their lives woven into the fabric of the community's shared history. Weeks passed, and the town began to breathe differently, lighter, freer. The oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by cautious hope. The vanished neighbors' faces appeared less as ghosts and more as reminders, their stories a warning and a call to vigilance. Yet, deep beneath the floorboards, the entity still stirred. It had been weakened but not destroyed, a reminder that some shadows endure, waiting for the moment when silence returns. In the quiet moments, you often wondered how much longer the town could hold the darkness at bay. But you also knew that as long as voices rose in defiance and memories were kept alive, the curse would never claim victory. The secrets buried alive were no longer silent. They had found their voice, and with it, a chance for redemption. And in the fight between light and shadow, the bravest act was to remember. The early morning fog clung thickly to the streets, curling around the weathered facades of houses like ghostly fingers reaching out to grip the living. The town was changing, not in the obvious, visible way, but in something deeper, an intangible shift that seeped into the bones of the community. People walked with their heads held a little higher, their eyes no longer darting nervously to the shadows, but instead meeting one another with a cautious kind of understanding, as if the shared pain and shared fight had forged a fragile bond. You had become an unlikely figurehead in this movement, the keeper of stories, the one who bridged the past and the present. The diary and Eleanor's letters had become your weapons and shields, guiding you through a labyrinth of history, fear, and darkness. But with every step forward, you felt the weight of responsibility growing heavier. The curse beneath the floorboards was not just a local myth. It was a living force, an embodiment of the town's collective trauma and silence. To break it, you realized, required more than rituals or meetings. It demanded a reckoning. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, casting long shadows that stretched like claws over the cracked pavement, you received an anonymous note slipped under your door. The paper was rough, edges torn as if hastily ripped from a notebook, the ink smudged. The message was simple, chilling. Some things buried should stay buried. Stop digging or join them. The threat was clear, but instead of scaring you, it steeled your resolve. You knew the curse wasn't just about the supernatural. It was about the living, those who still clung to silence out of fear, shame, or guilt. The curse fed on secrecy, and those who wished to preserve it would do anything to keep the past hidden. Determined, you shared the note with Claire, who frowned deeply, her usual calm replaced by a flicker of unease. "This is bigger than we thought," she said. "Someone doesn't want this to end, and they're willing to make sure we don't get the chance." Together, you began digging deeper, literally and figuratively. Beneath the Grayson house and other long-abandoned properties, you explored hidden crawl spaces and forgotten cellars. You uncovered fragments of objects, shattered dolls, rusted tools, faded photographs, each a whisper from the past, a piece of the story that the town had tried to bury. One evening, while investigating an old well at the edge of the neighborhood, you felt the air grow impossibly cold. The silence was thick, oppressive. As you peered into the darkness, your flashlight flickered, and for a moment, you thought you saw a shadow move beneath the surface of the water, a fleeting glimpse of something not quite human. The ground trembled faintly, a subtle warning that the darkness was far from defeated. Back at your apartment, sleepless nights became the norm. You found yourself haunted by dreams of the vanished neighbors, their faces blurred but their eyes filled with silent pleas. They seemed trapped between worlds, caught beneath the floorboards in a liminal space where time had no meaning. Your research led you to old town records, where you discovered references to a forgotten society, a secret group known only as the Keepers, who had once attempted to guard the town against the curse. The Keepers had performed rituals to bind the darkness, but their efforts were fragmented, their knowledge lost over generations. You realized that to truly end the curse, you needed to reconnect with the Keepers' legacy, to piece together their ancient rites and knowledge. It was a daunting task, requiring trust, courage, and the willingness to confront the town's darkest secrets head-on. You and Claire reached out to historians, folklore experts, and even psychics, gathering every scrap of information that might help reconstruct the lost rituals. The more you learned, the clearer it became that the curse was a living force, ancient, intelligent, and adaptive. It could sense fear, hesitation, and doubt, growing stronger when faced with silence or denial. Community gatherings became battlegrounds of will and belief. Some residents embraced the quest for truth and healing. Others resisted, fearful of what revealing the past might unleash. Arguments erupted, old grudges resurfaced, and the fragile unity you had built began to fray. One night, after a particularly heated meeting, you received a visitor. A man cloaked in shadows, his eyes sharp and calculating. He introduced himself simply as Elias. His presence was unsettling, but there was a depth to his knowledge that intrigued you. Elias claimed to be a descendant of the Keepers, one of the last who still remembered the old ways. He spoke of rites to seal the darkness, but warned that they required sacrifice, not of life, but of memory. To break the curse, the town would have to willingly forget certain painful truths, to let go of some of its past. You wrestled with this revelation. Could you ask the town to forget what it had endured? Would letting go mean healing, or would it mean erasing the very foundation of your resistance? The choice weighed heavily on your conscience, but the shadows beneath the floorboards were growing restless, their whispers turning into screams that echoed in the night. Together with Claire and Elias, you prepared for a final gathering, an ancient rite intended to sever the curse's hold once and for all. The town hall was packed, the air electric with tension and anticipation. Faces lined with fear, hope, and determination stared back at you, each person carrying their own scars and stories. The ritual began with a circle of light, candles flickering as you chanted words passed down through centuries. The ground beneath trembled, shadows twisting and writhing, battling against the force of your collective will. Suddenly, the air exploded with a deafening roar, and the darkness surged, taking form as a massive, shifting figure beneath the floorboards, an embodiment of fear, loss, and silence. It reached out, tendrils clawing at the edges of reality, trying to pull the gathered souls into oblivion. But the town stood firm, voices rising as one, refusing to be consumed. With a blinding flash, the darkness shattered like glass, fragments scattering into the ether. A profound silence followed, a silence that was not empty, but full of release. You opened your eyes to see the faces around you softened, tears streaming as years of fear and pain lifted. The curse had been broken. Yet, even as the light filled the hall, you knew that some secrets were forever woven into the town's fabric, lessons etched in the hearts of its people, reminders that the battle between light and shadow was eternal. But for now, the vanished neighbors were finally at peace, their stories no longer lost beneath the floorboards. The curse that wouldn't let go had been laid to rest, and the town could finally begin to breathe free. The morning after the ritual dawned clear and crisp, the kind of day that seems to carry promise in its very air. But despite the sunlight filtering through the windows, the town's awakening felt different, subtle, like a collective exhale after a long-held breath. People moved about their routines with a new lightness, their expressions less guarded, their steps less hesitant. It was as if the heavy veil that had cloaked their lives for decades was finally lifting. Yet, beneath this fragile calm, you sensed the stirrings of something deeper, a silent conversation between the past and the present, a reckoning that had only just begun. The following weeks became a whirlwind of discovery and reflection. With the curse broken, Hidden histories began to surface like drowned memories reaching for air. Elders shared stories they had kept locked away, tales of sorrow and resilience that had shaped the community in ways no one had dared to speak aloud. Walls that once held secrets now echoed with voices, and in those stories, the town found not just pain but profound strength. You found yourself at the center of this renaissance, a reluctant historian turned guardian of memory. The diary you discovered, once a mere artifact, became a symbol of survival and resistance. Eleanor's words, once buried beneath layers of dust and fear, inspired a new generation to confront their shadows rather than hide from them. Schools began incorporating local history into their curricula, emphasizing not just the folklore but the human stories behind the legends. Art installations appeared in public spaces, murals depicting faces of the vanished neighbors, sculptures symbolizing the struggle between light and dark. The town was healing, not by forgetting, but by remembering and reclaiming its narrative. But healing was never linear. For some, the lifting of the curse brought a resurgence of old wounds, reopening fractures that had barely begun to mend. Families grappled with painful revelations, and some chose to leave, unable or unwilling to face the ghosts of their pasts. The town was becoming a mosaic of stories, some joyful, some tragic, all intertwined. Amidst this transformation, you continued your personal journey, wrestling with the duality of your role. You had become both a chronicler and a participant, a witness to the unfolding drama of a community reborn. The weight of memory pressed on you, but so did the hope that had blossomed from the darkness. One evening, as twilight settled, you stood on the porch of your home, gazing at the horizon where the sun dipped behind the hills. The air was filled with the scent of pine and earth, grounding you in the present even as your mind wandered through the labyrinth of what had been and what might be. Your thoughts drifted back to the vanished neighbors, their faces no longer blurry in your dreams but vivid and real. You understood now that their disappearance was never just a mystery but a metaphor for the silences we all carry, the parts of ourselves we bury beneath the floorboards of our lives. As the stars began to emerge, you felt a profound connection to the cycle of darkness and light, loss and renewal. The curse was broken, but its lessons remained, etched into the fabric of the town and your soul. In that moment, you realized the story was far from over. It was a living, breathing thing, evolving with every choice, every memory shared, every fear faced. And you were no longer just a spectator. You were part of the story, a guardian of its truth and its light. The journey ahead promised challenges and discoveries, but also the possibility of true healing. A healing that comes not from forgetting, but from embracing the full spectrum of human experience. And as you closed your eyes that night, the silence was no longer empty. It was filled with the whispers of a town reborn, a testament to the power of remembrance and the resilience of the human spirit. The days that followed became a tapestry of moments, some quiet, some charged with revelation, as the town's new chapter unfolded. What was once an undercurrent of fear and suspicion now bubbled with a cautious optimism, a fragile hope that refused to be extinguished. The people moved through their days with tentative smiles, testing the boundaries of this newfound freedom. Yet, beneath the surface, the echoes of the past lingered like shadows stretching at dusk, reminding everyone that healing was a complex, often messy process. You found yourself drawn deeper into the lives of those around you. There was Margaret, the elderly woman who had lived through decades of silence, now volunteering at the local museum, eager to share the stories she'd kept locked away. Her hands trembled as she unfolded yellowed letters, her voice steady but soft as she recounted tales of love and loss, resistance and survival. Watching her, you understood that history was not just dates and events but the lifeblood of a community. Then there was Samuel, the town's historian, who had long dismissed the supernatural explanations for the disappearances as mere folklore. Now, faced with undeniable evidence and the collective awakening of his neighbors, he grappled with his skepticism. His late-night research sessions spilled into early mornings, his study cluttered with books and notes as he sought to reconcile fact and legend. You often found yourselves debating late into the night, his logical mind wrestling with the inexplicable, your own beliefs shifting under the weight of what you had uncovered. Children played in the streets with a new sense of freedom, their laughter piercing the heavy silence that had once blanketed the town. Schools held workshops encouraging them to express their experiences through art and storytelling, fostering a generation that could confront the past without fear. The walls of classrooms were adorned with drawings of the vanished neighbors, not as ghosts but as heroes whose stories deserved to be told. Amidst these changes, a palpable tension remained. Some residents resisted the unraveling of old secrets, fearing that the truth would bring more pain than peace. Arguments flared in town meetings. Divisions reopened as differing perspectives clashed. The desire to protect the status quo battled against the need for transparency and healing. You witnessed the town's struggles firsthand. Invitations to gatherings, both formal and informal, filled your calendar as you were seen as a bridge between the past and future. The diary, once a mysterious artifact, had become a symbol of courage and truth, and its pages were studied and discussed with reverence. The legacy of Eleanor and those like her had transformed from a dark curse to a beacon guiding the way forward. One evening, you were invited to speak at the community center, a moment both daunting and profound. Standing before a crowd of faces marked by years of silence and sorrow, you shared the journey, the discoveries, the pain, and the hope. Your words resonated, weaving a narrative that honored the complexity of their shared history. Tears were shed, hands were held, and a collective resolve emerged to face the future together. But healing, as you had come to understand, was not a destination but a journey. There were nights when the weight of the past felt unbearable, when the silence behind closed doors whispered of losses too deep to fully articulate. Yet, with each day, the town took another step toward wholeness. In quiet moments, you reflected on the lessons learned, that the stories we bury are never truly lost, that confronting our shadows can lead to light, and that community is built not on perfection but on shared humanity. As spring gave way to summer, the town bloomed, not just in its gardens but in its spirit. Festivals celebrated the resilience of those who had come before, their memories honored through music, dance, and storytelling. The vanished neighbors were no longer a source of fear but of inspiration, their lives and sacrifices woven into the fabric of everyday life. Your own path continued to intertwine with the town's evolution. The diary remained a cherished companion, a reminder of the power of stories to heal and transform. You documented this new era with care, knowing that the truth was a gift and a responsibility. And so, beneath the surface of ordinary days, a profound transformation took place. The curse had been broken, but more importantly, the town had reclaimed its soul. What was once hidden beneath the floorboards had been brought to light, not to haunt but to heal. In the stillness of night, when the world seemed to hold its breath, you could almost hear the whispered gratitude of those long gone, their voices carried on the wind, a chorus of resilience, reminding you that even in the darkest places, the seeds of hope can take root and flourish. The summer that followed the breaking of the curse brought with it an energy the town had never before experienced. It was not just the warmth of the sun or the vibrant colors bursting from the gardens and trees. It was a renewed spirit, a collective awakening that rippled through every street, every home, every heart. The people no longer moved as mere survivors of an unspoken past, but as active participants in a shared destiny. Days were filled with community gatherings where stories flowed like rivers, connecting generations who had once lived as islands. The public square, which had been a neglected space for decades, became a vibrant hub of life. Local musicians played melodies inspired by the tales of vanished neighbors, while poets and artists found inspiration in the town's journey from darkness to light. One afternoon, you found yourself at the center of a small crowd gathered around a makeshift stage. A group of children, faces flushed with excitement, performed a play they had written and directed themselves. It was a story of courage and friendship, woven with threads from the diary's pages, bringing Eleanor's spirit alive in a way words on paper never could. The audience listened, rapt and silent, caught in the spell of innocence and truth. The town's elders watched with tears in their eyes, their pride mingled with sorrow and hope. They spoke softly among themselves, recognizing that this new generation carried the torch forward, unburdened by the silence that had once suffocated them. You saw in their eyes a deep gratitude, as if the healing of the town was also healing wounds within their own souls. In your own home, the diary sat on a polished wooden table, its pages carefully preserved and annotated. Every entry was a window into a world that had once been shrouded in mystery, now illuminated by the collective effort to understand and remember. You spent hours poring over the text, uncovering nuances and connections that deepened your appreciation of Eleanor's courage and the sacrifices of those who had vanished. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in hues of violet and gold, a knock at your door brought a visitor you had not expected. It was Lena, a woman whose family had lived in the town for generations, but who had returned only recently after years away. She carried with her an old box, weathered and tied with a faded ribbon. Inside the box were photographs, letters, and artifacts, fragments of memories that had been preserved with care but hidden away. Among them was a portrait of a young girl whose eyes mirrored those of Eleanor in the diary sketches. Lena explained that this was her grandmother, a woman whose story had been lost in the shadows until now. Together, you began piecing together this new narrative, expanding the tapestry of the town's history. Lena's family stories added depth and color to the understanding of what had transpired beneath the floorboards. Her grandmother's life, filled with resilience and quiet rebellion, became a symbol of the indomitable human spirit. As the days grew longer and the nights warmer, you found yourself reflecting on the nature of memory and legacy. The vanished neighbors were no longer ghosts to be feared but ancestors to be honored, their lives a testament to the power of stories to bridge the chasms of time and pain. The town's transformation was mirrored in its physical landscape. Buildings once abandoned were restored with care, blending old architecture with new life. Streets were renamed to commemorate those who had vanished, their names etched on plaques that caught the sunlight and glimmered like promises. Local businesses embraced the change, creating spaces that welcomed visitors eager to learn the town's story. Cafes featured walls adorned with photographs and excerpts from the diary, inviting patrons to immerse themselves in history while sipping their coffee. Bookshops hosted readings and discussions, fostering a culture of curiosity and connection. Yet, despite the outward signs of renewal, you remained mindful of the fragility beneath it all. The scars of the past were not easily erased, and the process of healing demanded vigilance and compassion. You continued to listen, to gather stories, to bear witness to the complexities of human experience. One night, while walking through the quiet streets, you paused beneath the old elm tree that had stood sentinel for generations. The breeze rustled the leaves, and for a moment, you imagined the whispers of those who had vanished, carried on the wind like a gentle caress. It was a reminder that the past was never truly gone but lived on in the hearts and memories of the living. In the days that followed, you found new ways to honor this connection. Community memorials were organized, not as somber occasions but as celebrations of life and resilience. Music filled the air, laughter echoed through the streets, and the weight of silence lifted further. Your role evolved from chronicler to healer, from observer to participant. The diary had been the spark, but the flame was kept alive by the people. Their stories, their courage, their refusal to be defined by tragedy. As summer ripened into autumn, the town stood transformed, a living testament to the power of remembrance and the indelible strength of the human spirit. What had once been hidden beneath the floorboards was now a foundation upon which a vibrant future could be built. And in the quiet moments before sleep, as shadows lengthened and the world hushed, you felt the profound truth that even the darkest curses could be broken, not by magic alone, but by the enduring light of hope, memory, and community. The story of the vanished neighbors had begun as whispers beneath the floorboards, shadows flickering in forgotten corners. Yet, it grew into something far greater, a testament to the resilience of those who refused to be silenced, a reminder that even in the depths of darkness, light finds a way to break through. As the town embraced its past, the burden of secrecy lifted, replaced by a collective strength born of truth and remembrance. The diary, once a solitary beacon, had sparked a movement that transformed lives and healed generations. You stood at the threshold of this new chapter, knowing that the journey was never truly over. The stories would continue to be told, the memories nurtured, and the legacy honored, not as ghosts haunting the night, but as eternal flames guiding the way forward. In the end, beneath the floorboards lay not just secrets buried alive, but seeds of hope planted deep, waiting, growing, and blossoming into a future where nothing was lost and everything was remembered. The curse was broken, the story was told, and from the darkness, a new dawn rose, unyielding and radiant.